Hey, my name is Matt Stohrer and I repair saxophones for a living. And this video is brought to you by you, thanks to your generous crowdfunding contributions to the open source saxophone project. Thank you very much. Today I would like to show you a couple examples of hinge tube, hinge rod, key fit, right? So I highly encourage you to check out the links down in the description. I've got some videos and articles there that will round this information out for you. But this video specifically is just to show you examples so you can look at instruments yourself and see whether they've got an acceptable amount of play or if they've got any swedge marks, all the stuff I'm about to show you. But if you want to understand what's going on, why it's important, or what it looks like in a pivot key, not just a hinge rod key like we're about to look at, please follow those links down below. So we're talking about hinge rod keys, where you've got a long rod inside of a key. And basically what needs to happen is that the key needs to fit snugly around this rod, and then the key needs to fit good side to side between either, two posts, or a post and another key, or a key and a key, so it doesn't move side to side on the rod. And then the rod needs to fit well inside the post. So, because even if a key is fit well, if it can then move around inside the post, everything can move. And basically, there's a lot of reasons that key fit is important. And to really understand why and to have a full understanding of that, you need to watch the video linked down below about key fit and the G-sharp bis adjustment, which is a really good example of how even just a little bit of slop in key work can cause problems. Now, that said, most saxophones do not come from the factory, really hardly ever, with their keys perfectly fit. The only way you can really do that is either get lucky or to do it by hand, and the factories just don't have time to do it by hand. They spend about as much time building a saxophone from sheet brass as I do overhauling it, and if they spent as much time as it would take to make the instrument as perfect as they possibly could, then you'd be paying about twice as much for the saxophone, which would make them go out of business. So certain corners that can be cut are cut at the factory, and that's just how it is. So the instrument we're looking at now is actually a really good example because this is my own personal instrument. This is a King Zephyr Special, and I had just taken it apart to overhaul it after acquiring it a few years back when someone called me up to see if I wanted to play with them. And I jumped at the chance, but it also meant I only had 48 hours to overhaul my own horn. So I did a partial mechanical rebuild. So there's parts of this horn that are mechanically fit, like I like to do, and then there's parts that aren't, so I can show you both on one horn. So first of all, I'd like to provide a negative example. This is a Selmer Mark VI, which is in very good physical condition. It's all original. It's an alto. I did a repad on it a few years ago, and it's in for a checkup. And this is how it came from the factory. And I was specifically asked just to do a repad, not a mechanical rebuild. Mechanical rebuilds are sometimes completely necessary. Sometimes they're more of a optional improvement, and in this case it would have been an optional improvement, and since this instrument was all original and played pretty well, it was decided to leave it as is. But you can see this is how this instrument came from the factory. Now if I grab this key, and this is how you evaluate play in the key. Now you don't want to put too much pressure on it because you don't want to bend the key, but you just grab it and you wiggle it a little bit. Now you can see that's moving quite a bit. And this key right here actually has all three types of play that we talked about earlier. It moves side to side between the keys it is adjacent to, so this hinge tube is not long enough. It wobbles around the rod itself, so the tube is not tight enough around the rod. And if I give it a bit more flex, you can actually see down here how like everything is moving. So that rod is not tight inside that post either. So that's got all three major kinds of mechanical play in it, and that's how it came from the factory. But all that said, this key still is very quiet, feels good, and the horn plays all right. Now obviously it would be much improved if you were to take care of that mechanical stuff, but also because you need to impart enough force to a hinge tube to bend metal, often that means leaving marks. And on a horn that's perfect, that plays pretty decently as is, the improvement was not deemed necessary. And the customer's king, so that's what we did. But that's an example of a Mark 6 that came from the factory with key play, and that's pretty common. So when you see that, it doesn't necessarily mean that the horn has been beat up or has a ton of wear in it. I mean, you can see by looking at the pearls that this horn has not been played a whole lot, right? But there it is, there's the wear. So obviously that would be best to fix, but it doesn't mean that the horn's been messed up if you see something that looks like that. Now, here's a horn that obviously has a bit more wear on it, but when I grab that key, like I did the other one, let's see if I can get it so it's easy to see. Nothing moves. It doesn't move up and down. It doesn't wiggle side to side. The post isn't loose. If I actually put the horn down so I'm not stabilizing it with my other hand, the whole horn moves, right? And you can actually do that on any key on this stack here because I've fit this upper stack. Nothing moves. And of course, even though it doesn't move, the keys are completely free, very light. I like light spring tensions, especially on Kings. They really feel good with light spring tensions. Everything is quiet, everything is absolutely free and very light and, you know, super fast, right? So it's only moving in the direction that it's supposed to move, and the fit is basically, I mean, you know, I hesitate to say perfect, but it's pretty darn good. And you can also see a little bit, if we look really close, like look at this spot. Let me get something to point with. Look at this spot right here, okay? If you look closely, you can see right here, there's a little spot of like burnished metal. And that is a swedge mark. That's where I applied the force to swedge that key. That spot right there. You can also see a little bit right here, and a little bit right here, and a little bit right here, okay? It's kind of hard to see because I try to make it so that it's not super visible. But Kings have nickel hinge tubes, which is a lot harder than brass, so you have to apply an extra amount of force. So there's really not any avoiding having that be visible. And you can see it a bit more down here on the lower stack, where I also fit keys. This area right here, you can see how that's kind of a burnished look, and it's also a tiny bit tapered from being squeezed down around the rod. And there's also, that's not a mark, that is lacquer wear. The mark is right here. Can you see that? See that sort of burnished and pressed look? And then that's just lacquer wear. Same thing here, that's lacquer wear. There's the burnished look, and here's another bit of burnishing from my swedging. Let's see if there's another spot where we can see it. Yeah, so right here, there's another place. You can see how it's kind of tapered and burnished a little bit. And right here as well. So if you know what to look for, you can look at an instrument and see if it's had any mechanical work done to it in the past. And that's not necessarily bad if it's done well. I mean, if it looks like this, then probably, hopefully, the person knew what they were doing. And that's assuming I know what I'm doing. But if it's done poorly, here's an example. I bought a horn from the Ukraine a long time ago, and this is what the swedging looked like on that instrument. Now you can see that is just absolutely awful, and that has pretty much destroyed that key. And another thing worth noting about this stuff here is that, you know, if these are the swedge marks, which I think we can be fairly confident that they are, that the key has only been tightened around the rod right here and right here, right? So there's nothing tightening it down over here, so that's probably still going to rock back and forth. So when you're swedging, you've got to actually give it, you know, the more places you can do it, the more contact area you're going to have between the rod and the hinge tube itself, which means the longer it's going to wear and the more stable it's going to be. So this is basically a worst case scenario. If you ever see something that looks like this on your keys, return the horn. So that is what key fitting looks like, and that's how to evaluate it. You don't want to, you know, put too much energy into it. You really don't need to. If you've got play in keywork, it is going to move pretty easily. I mean, I'm really not applying much force here at all, and you can see how much that's moving. And that's not hurting it to apply that little bit of force there and wiggle it around. I mean, that's free movement. I'm not bending anything. That's just how it sits. But it is undoubtable, it is beyond a doubt when you've got good key fit, because just nothing moves. You don't feel any clicks, any clacks, anything like that. And when you want to evaluate an instrument, you can do that sort of stuff. And also, if you can, grab the rod or grab the hinge tube close to the post and try and move it and see if that rod is tight inside the post. And on this instrument, I told you I didn't get to do all of the key fitting, only part of it. Here's a key I didn't fit. So you can see that moving there. Yeah, and there's enough motion in there that it's actually making some mechanical clicking noises as it moves back and forth, which I'm not a fan of, and obviously I'm going to have to get this fixed. Good thing I know a guy. All right, I hope you found this helpful, useful, informative. My name is Matt Stohrer. I repair saxophones for a living. Again, for a much more complete understanding of key fitting, follow the links down below. There's an awful lot to learn. This is basically just designed to help you learn how to see it. And there's also a really great link down below to Stephen Howard's website, where he has an article called, I believe it said, Checking the Action, or Testing the Action, where he's got some really great graphics that show exactly what's going on inside the keywork. But if you go to that description and you read and watch all the stuff in there, in addition to this, you should have a pretty good understanding of what mechanical fit is on a saxophone and what to look for. Thanks for watching.